I mean, I think those are all really, really good suggestions, and I think definitely we need to do the Bardstown when Dan's back.
Yeah.
And Liquor Store 101 is very interesting, but I think we need to put more time and thought, or at least I do, into prepping for that one.
Yeah, my brain is fried today, so I think personal purchasing strategy is...
Mine was the same. That's what I was kind of pushing for this weekend, but...
A podcast about bourbon and the ones who drink it. This is Bourbon Matters. Welcome to Bourbon Matters. I'm Jake.
And I'm Gold Eagle Jake.
And tonight we've got a listener suggestion on a topic. So shout out to Matt for providing us not only one, but 3 topics that we'll probably be covering in the next few weeks or so, because they're all pretty good suggestions. So Matt, thank you very much. We appreciate sending us some messages on Instagram with your suggestions. So tonight we're going to talk about our personal purchasing strategies with whiskey and other alcohols in general, I guess. So Matt's question was that, or suggestion was, he'd be interested to hear on how we approach buying more whiskey or beer or spirits. Do we have budgets or constraints that we give ourselves, or are we just freewheeling? So
it's good we have a married guy and an unmarried guy on here.
Yeah. Well, and like the last 3 years for me have been a total roller coaster in terms of how I go about buying things. So yeah,
let's
I'm
hear
actually.
It. What is this roller coaster that you talk about?
So we've talked.
Seems like it just keeps going up.
Yeah, we've talked at length about how me and Dan have got into bourbon heavily. We met Roberto. Roberto had a big collection. He was a horrible influence on both me and Dan, and particularly me. And like my early bourbon adventure was just indiscriminate buying of bottles. And a lot of what I have is from that first year, I would say. And the past 3 or 4 months, I've been starting to go through everything that I've got, and I'm kind of purging stuff that I tried and didn't care for, or bottles that have been open for almost 3 years now, and stuff like that. But I went through the straight tater phase of only trying to find the Blantons and the Taylor and the Eagle Rare, trying to hunt for all the exclusive stuff.
Everyone goes through that.
A lot of that
first initial phase.
Yeah.
I was talking to Nikhil. He's probably listening to this episode. Shout out to Nikhil. But I was talking to him earlier today, and he was just telling me how he thanks us for getting him out of that tater phase, and how he used to just hunt for E.H. Taylor and Blantons and Eagle Rare, and that was... He admitted that was before he really was into drinking whiskey. He was just sort of getting into it. We know everyone kind of starts at that point. And he talked about how Ohio, because Ohio is a control state, they don't get a ton of brands there. You just got to pick and choose from whatever the state decides to bring in. So a lot of your small, craftier brands you can't buy in Ohio. So he was saying how everybody in Ohio is just so stuck on Buffalo Trace. The state running the liquor has like brainwashed people in Ohio to only care about Buffalo Trace and search for all the drops of Taylor, Blanton's, Eagle Rare, and that's like all people care about. So he has been sharing a lot of our store picks, so shout out to him. Thank you for that. Because he's come back and is like, hey, I need 8 bottles of this pick. Because we blinded it up against, something that my friends were freaking out about, and nobody believed that I actually poured it. But yeah, so, everyone kind of goes through that phase, I feel like, but I feel like you went like full in, all in, and just pretty much like jumped on everything, and just built this pretty big collection. I mean, if you're watching us on the video, that's probably what, like 20% of the bottles that you own behind you?
Yeah.
And that would be a pretty big collection for one person either way. But I don't know. I also think it's a lot cheaper to build a nice selection at home than to go out to the bars and try and taste all this stuff. You're going to end up spending a lot more money, inflated prices on pours, especially if they're harder to find bottles. And COVID kind of taught us all that maybe it's nice to be home, and maybe it's nice to have people over instead of going out. So a lot of people have kind of adapted this lifestyle of hosting gatherings and neighborhood parties and stuff like that. And I don't know, I think it's super cool to be able to feel like you're out in a bar, but you're at somebody's house, and be able to taste all these crazy things, and just explore and expand your palate that way.
Yeah, and it's funny that you bring up tasting things and stuff, because in the early part of my bourbon hunting journey, I would buy almost everything blind, and I can tell you that my hit rate was probably like 20% on stuff that I actually enjoyed like thoroughly. Probably now close to 50% of my collection are things that I tried at master classes, and bought at the master class, because I liked them so much. And like, that's helped me shift the way I look at like things a lot. I'm not really looking for like just average things now. What interests me now are like single barrels, one-off kind of things that are super interesting and unique. I think, like, that's not to say that I don't have some Tater bottles, and I like to try some of those still.
Well, let's be clear here though. Like Elijah Craig barrel proof releases, which I know you love, I don't think those are Tater bottles.
Yeah.
Those are 12-year barrel proof Kentucky bourbon for $70. I think stuff like that. I'm looking behind you at like Parker's Heritage, like those are legit heavy hitter bottles. When I think of Tater bottles, I'm talking like Blanton's, Eagle Rare, all your standard stuff that should be just sitting on the shelf but isn't.
Yeah. And we've talked about artificial scarcity and all those things in past episodes. Like that's definitely been an influence on me too. Like, do I really want to support some distilleries that are choosing to withhold product basically, in various ways, or like my boys at Heaven Hill are like putting Elijah Toasted on the shelf now. They're doing God's work over there.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, come on, it was only a matter of time. Like they're the biggest distillery, and how hard is it to get some secondary new oak barrels and throw Elijah Craig small batch into it? Same thing with the 7-year bottle and bond. Like, they're churning out so much whiskey that it really was just a matter of time. And yeah, good on them for getting that stuff out there. And they, they're kind of doing the opposite of artificial scarcity, I believe, because they're kind of holding back until they have enough to hit everywhere across the country, whereas other distilleries are just spreading it so thin across the country, it's appearing like there's none of it. I mean, I saw a picture today, somebody posted Buffalo Trace had like 500 bottles of Eagle Rare, and they said at 1 o'clock they're putting out 500 more. I mean, and people are flocking to the distillery. All the comments were, "Oh, I hope I make it. I'm 40 minutes away." Like, that's just insane. 1,000 bottles of Eagle Rare going, limit 1 bottle per person, like that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's a 10-year bourbon. It's not something you can just flip a switch and make. So obviously they have a ton of barrels ready and, becoming of age, and the stuff that's becoming of age now is before they even did most of their expansion. So what's it going to look like in 5 years and 10 years? I mean, we preach on this and harp on this all the time, and I know most of the people on this podcast already know this, but I wish more of our customers would listen so that they can understand that you're just wasting your time. There's no reason to be chasing a lot of these tater bottles. Like, it's almost insane. I mean, good for you if you really like them. I'm not saying they're bad. Good for you if you really like them and buying them and you're drinking them. But this is the time to explore those one-offs, to find a smaller distillery that you really like, to find that barrel pick that completely wows you, that will make you buy a case of it so that years down the road you can go back and revisit it anytime. Because in 10 years from now, when all that Buffalo Trace stuff is on the shelf and available to anyone, it might be too late to try a lot of these smaller distilleries and a lot of these single barrels that are, I think, truly unique and really, really good at the moment.
Yeah, and my opinion on this that we've again talked about in other episodes is, I think a lot of the craft distilleries are going to get pushed out of the market once the big six really starts hitting everyday findability on like all SKUs. So yeah, if you're looking for, like, now is not a good time to spend your effort on stuff that in like 100% certainty will be on the shelf in the next 5 to 7 years all the time. 100% guaranteed you will be able to find Weller Special Reserve on the shelf at any store in the country every single day. You'll be able to find Eagle Rare, you'll be able to find Taylor. Like, all that stuff is going to be staples, bottom shelf whiskey at every retailer.
Unless,
like,
I think so too, unless Buffalo Trace plays some stupid game where they start going to all these other countries and creating the scarcity there. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's a good time to
go explore local distilleries, go explore like regional craft distilleries. Like, that's the kind of stuff that you want to be hitting. Like, Dancing Goat has phenomenal sourced whiskey that they're releasing. In a I can't remember what the series name is that they're releasing the sourced whiskey under.
Is it the Quirky and Humble?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think that's the
but
name.
Like, they have unreal barrels of MGP that's been aging in their Wisconsin warehouse. That's just phenomenal. And like, they're doing crazy experimental stuff. We talked about Chattanooga last week, which watch that episode if you haven't, because they're doing this crazy experimental stuff that's like wild and amazing. And
Dark Arts.
Dark Arts is phenomenal as well.
Even Few, the quality has gone up tremendously. If you haven't tasted Few in a couple years, it's definitely worth a revisit. We've got Hard Truth popping up. I mean, we could go on and on and on this list, but I think something to discuss, getting us back to the buying habits, and is FOMO, because I think FOMO is a real thing with a lot of people. Not going to say his name on here, but there's a customer who, I mean, there's probably a lot of customers like this, but one in particular who has severe FOMO. Like, anytime we drop something is like, how many are left? Like, what are you think it's my palate would like it? Like, what are the tasting notes? And then he'll buy it. And then if we don't sell out, he's like, oh, you didn't sell out of this? Like, must not be that good. Like, can I return it? Or like when we do sell out of something, he'll be like, oh, please, like, I know you probably have more, like, please, if you get more, can you let me know? Like, I didn't think it was going to sell out that quick. I'm like, well, we've been messaging for the last 2-3 hours talking about it, so you could have went online and bought one if you wanted to. But FOMO's a real thing, and I think a lot of times people buy just because they see something selling quick, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. It could just be, I don't know, something new. But that's also why you need to find a store or somebody's palate, or a bar, whatever it is, that you trust what they're doing. You trust their palate, because there's just so much out there now, and marketing and labels can completely overtake what a whiskey should taste like and what you think a whiskey's going to taste like.
Yeah, I mean, I totally.
Do you feel the FOMO?
Yeah, I totally had the FOMO problem. I used to sit on Instagram waiting for the Saturday tater drop from Gold Eagle. Waiting to see what was going to happen. I gotta go get the Eagle Rare. I gotta go get the whatever, and then most of the time I'm not like moving on a Saturday morning by that early, so I'd miss it, and then think to myself after missing it 20 times, like, I'm not really actually that upset that I didn't get a bottle of whatever. It's like, at the end of the day, like, if I miss 1 or 2 Elijah Craig barrel proofs this year, that my world's not gonna end. Like, I don't need every single one. Like, there's 3 every year. Like, sure, like, one of them might be better than the other 2, but like, they're always good. And like, anybody that's telling you that like, oh, like, this one was terrible is full of shit. Like, they're all phenomenal bourbon. Like, and like, there's not like I don't know, like, I guess the part of the FOMO and like FOMO and like the collector kind of mindset go hand in hand, I think, a lot.
Absolutely.
And like, both of them, I think I've kind of been able to shed.
I mean, I think you definitely have. Especially the collector side of things. Like, I mean, most of your, pretty much, I would say, I don't know, what do you think, like 80% of your bottles are open?
Yeah, probably.
And some of them, like, only have a couple sips out of, like, so you can tell, like, you just wanted to try these and, just to see what they taste like. But yeah, so an interesting thing to discuss on the topic is I have noticed more and more customers lately who have told me, I just realized that I have 300, 400, sometimes 500 plus bottles in my collection, and there's no way I'm going to drink all of it. And because of that, I'm just going to slow down, and instead of buying, just going to come to the bar. And I was talking with Nikhil about this today too. Like our bar business has picked up big time because people are getting choosier on what bottles they're buying and taking home. And thankfully, you're not going to rack up an expensive bill coming to our bar. You get the experience of tasting multiple things, most likely cheaper than anywhere else you're going to find them. But yeah, that's the beauty of having a tasting bar, is letting the customers taste whatever they want and really, being firm with a decision on what bottle they're taking home and making sure they really enjoy it.
Yeah. And like, that's the great thing about it is like, you usually are pretty, democratic in, what you guys put on the bar. Like if you get one bottle or two bottles of something, they usually go to the bar. And it's like great that I can go there and try the Heaven Hill 18-year bourbon, and it's like, wow, this is about as fantastic as I thought it was going to be. And then
Mm-hmm.
I feel good about everything, and it's like, okay, I tried it, I enjoyed it thoroughly, cool, great. Like, I don't need to go spend my time trying to find a bottle when I know I'm never going to find one. So like,
I mean, and they're expensive retail,
Yeah,
$400 on a bottle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a car payment right there for a lot of people. But
yeah,
it's funny how some people get upset, like when the one bottle goes to the bar. They're like, "Oh, come on! Like, I really wanted it," and it's like, well, a lot of people really wanted it. More than 50 people really wanted it, but only 50 people are going to get to taste it. And I wish I could say this to your face, but I'm not going to. If I was going to sell that bottle, you are not even close to being on that list that would have gotten a crack at it. I mean, you know how we do it. We're pretty transparent. Like once a year, we do email our top 150, 200 customers, and second half of the year is when we start saving stuff like that to go into those emails. It's just, I think, the most fair way to do it. So yeah, it's funny. Everyone has a different opinion, of course. But with this, it's kind of, you get huge opinions one way or the other, this way or that way. There's a lot of different ways you could think about this and look at this, but yeah, I don't know. I think from a purchasing standpoint, I don't know. Like, what would you're in like a different position than most people because you already have basically everything. But like, how do you resist? How do you resist these new releases? Are you still like, what are you doing now that you have built a massive collection? And how about, to add on to that question, would you, if you were to go back 2-3 years, or if you were talking to somebody who's kind of just starting and maybe only has 20 or 30 bottles, would you recommend them building up a library of what you have right now?
Yeah, so I'll start with that. My advice to anybody that's got, the beginnings of a collection is to try everything before you buy it. Number one, don't waste time trying to hunt stuff. Like, I know a lot of people enjoy like hunting for whiskey, and like if you like really enjoy it, like, God bless you, go have fun. But like, to me, it's more interesting to go to things like master classes, go to tastings, go to tasting bars, and try stuff that normally I probably wouldn't have given the time of day. I think some of my favorite master classes have been brands that I had written off as I was never going to drink them, and I was like blown away by some of them. So yeah, I try everything for sure.
So then, what would you say to the...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what would you say to the person who has been trying things for a few years, maybe only has 20 bottles because they were getting ready to move, or they were getting ready to build like a speakeasy bar inside their house, and now it's finally built, and they're like, all right, I want to fill this thing up and get up to 100 and 150 bottles. Like, what would your advice be to that person who already knows I don't need to chase down the tater stuff?
Yeah, I'd single barrels, one-off interesting things. Those are like what really like impress people. Like I had some people over from work yesterday, and yeah, my boss's boss is a Blanton's guy, so I had the Blantons out, and he was happy about it, you know. But I also had some Green River out. I had the Whistle Pig Camp Stock, you know, which is a one-off interesting whiskey. Everybody tried that and was like, wow, this is really unique and, you know, interesting. And, you know, it was a crowd pleaser. But then I was like, well, if you guys want to see something really cool, I've got this Arizona Mesquite smoked single malt. And that was by far the favorite pour of the night. 'Cause it's so different.
Delbach.
Like that's, yeah, the whiskey Delbach. If you can find it, I 100% recommend it. It's phenomenally good. But yeah, like that kind of stuff is, I think, what's more fun to share with people. And like, if you're gonna be the guy like me that has like everything, like sure, people will be like, if you whip out a bottle of Taylor, everyone's gonna be like, oh wow, Taylor. But like, if you whip out something that's like, no one in this room has ever heard of this before, try this, and people get blown away, like that's a lot of fun.
Well, and especially if you're having people over that are whiskey snobs as well.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna want to taste your I kind of feel bad. We keep like dogging hard on Buffalo Trace, but it's just the best example. Like, nobody's gonna want to taste your Taylor. Like nobody who's in a whiskey cares about Blanton's. Like the people who actually drink the stuff and build up a collection with open bottles, what excites them is single barrels, and it's part of the reason why I like the Adventurers Club and you know, admired their whole setup when I first went there, because it was like 90% store picks, and they had like a table of Russell's Reserve, and there was 60 different store pick bottles of Russell's, and then you go over to this corner and there's you know, like 30 store pick bottles of Knob Creek, and so on and so forth. So you know, that's somebody who gets it, who realizes like, yeah, this is where it's at right here, to be able to compare two of the same things that are totally different.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's like, if you're trying to be the speakeasy collector, you know, whiskey curator, comparison flights are a lot of fun. Or even like ABs on, you know, two different store picks of the same whiskey. You know, I like to do the Knob Creek single barrels from Gold Eagle back to back, you know, from like 2 different years. That's always fun. It's like, that's the kind of stuff that I would recommend to look for. And like, you know, I mean, it's just a wide variety too. Like, don't just have bourbon. Get some rye, get some scotch, get some wild hybrid bullshit, like, you know, blended stuff that's like crazy, you know, because you never know, like the benefit. It's a bit of a blessing and a curse, where I can walk into my office and be like, I feel like something completely different today, and I have a bunch of options. Sometimes it's a little difficult to make a choice, but
that's a good problem to have. A very good problem.
But that's why you have stuff like Rittenhouse or something where it's like, I don't feel like really making a decision today, so I'm just going to go with a tried and true, It's like,
it's funny how a lot of whiskey people say that, like, when you get home and you just don't want to think about the whiskey you're drinking, or you don't want to think about what to pour, you have those couple bottles that are ready to go at all times. Like, mine would definitely be Wild Turkey 101, just on the docket for, got a taste for some bourbon, but I don't really want to analyze it too much. I just want something tasty.
Yeah.
And you got to have a couple go-tos like that to tag on to all your different unique things that might be much better and much more complex, but you kind of need to sit there and do a little brain work, if you will, while you're tasting.
Yeah. One other thing that I've started doing, and to be fair, I would only recommend that people in a similar position to me do this. But I've been getting very liberal with which whiskeys I use in cocktails, just to see how they stack up. Like, for shits and giggles, I started using Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond, which 2 years ago I would have thought that was sacrilegious in my old fashions, and it is unbelievably fantastic. Especially the Jake Way with the Breckenridge bitters and some maple syrup. It's phenomenally good. And like I used the Hard Truth Gold Eagle pick to make rye old fashions, and like probably the best old fashioned I've ever made in my entire life. It was wildly good. But I can only do that because I have a case of that particular rye.
I mean, I was gonna say, like, I think people are starting to get more into craft cocktails, and I think it's much more acceptable now to use an expensive whiskey in a cocktail than it was 3 years ago.
If you're going to spend the time to make your own syrups,
right?
And like, people are like, my buddy Jimmy just took a bitters class to learn how to make his own bitters. So like there's all kinds of shit that you can do now on your own and like really make, super up class or high class cocktails, and really tailor them to what you want. We're
not talking Jack and Coke here. We're not talking orange juice and whatever. We're talking like some real craft cocktails where sometimes the only ingredients are booze, and they're very whiskey forward. Like those, like the whiskey that you're putting in there matters, and you're going to see a night and day difference if you use something that's bottom shelf and not good neat in a cocktail versus something you really like neat in a cocktail. I'm not saying go put your Parker's Heritage in a cocktail, but it's okay to put that $70, $80 bottle in a cocktail that you can possibly find again, because it's going to make a big difference in the cocktail. And that's another episode we should talk about and find like a bartender to join us and discuss how the cocktail scene has changed so much. Not only, I know it's changed a lot in the last 15 years or so, but it's probably changed a lot in the last 2 or 3 as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've gotten really snobby about my old fashions in particular. So like,
I'm very snobby about my cocktails too. I think that's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, and like, I look for what whiskey they're using in their cocktails, and you can tell instantly how much effort they're really putting into like picking the ingredients by what they're using as the base spirits for each of their cocktails. And the go-tos are Manhattans and Old Fashions. Those are the most telling because it's basically all whiskey with like a little bit of other stuff to sweeten it. And like if you're seeing somebody using 100 proof or higher whiskey in their old fashions, they know what they're doing, or their Manhattans. Like that's the, like, I think we've talked about this before, but like 100 proof is my go-to for building any cocktail. And if you have a really low, or if you have a barrel proof whiskey that drinks much lower than its proof, those also work excellently in cocktails.
I love Knob Creek single barrel old fashions.
Mm-hmm.
That's my go-to for when I want a really good old fashioned.
Yeah, like I've made like the hard truth pick is I think somewhere around that one yet. I think it's like 114 proof, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think it's 111, 110.
Yeah, it just makes a beautiful cocktail. It's so flavor heavy, and like you can really like it again. Can't talk up those Breckenridge bitters enough after you showed those to me, because they pull all those like really nice floral notes out of the rye in a great way. But this devolved into a cocktail episode, so
yeah, we're gonna save this for another episode. But yeah, purchasing, buying, I guess most
you
people
given
probably
us
wouldn't. Yeah, I was gonna say I should probably give mine. I mean, most people wouldn't believe me if I told you I have 15 bottles at home, and they're all open. But yeah, I mean, I've just kind of found what I like. I rotate through our single barrels, basically. Of course, I'm a little biased because I helped pick them, so I love all of them. But yeah, I kind of just rotate through single barrels. It keeps it interesting for me. And it's also a little different for me because I, control what goes on the bar at Gold Eagle. So usually if we're adding something new that I haven't tried, I'll give myself a little taste of it. But I'm kind of also in that boat where maybe 5 or 10 years down the road, I do want to have like a speakeasy bar inside my house, and that's when I'll really go all in. And I've kind of been like, picks that I know have come and went, saving bottles here and there from certain barrel picks that I really liked to get ready for that. But I feel like my palate's going to change and evolve, and when that time comes, I might like something totally different than what I'm drinking now, because we all go through different phases with proof, different phases with finished whiskey, different phases with rye, bourbon. For me, like, go through a lot of Scotch phases, really peaty phases. So kind of waiting until I'm ready to go all in and bring more bottles home. And start up that sense. But yeah, I mean, I do have bottles put aside for our bar inventory of like, ooh, let's whip out this pick from 4 years ago that, everybody loved and you won't be able to find it anymore. So things like that. I love, vintage bourbons and vintage spirits, something that you can go back and, something that's dated as a vintage, so you can go back and not just a 9-year, and every time you pick it up, it's the same 9-year bourbon. But how cool would it be if Knob Creek labeled every single barrel when it was distilled and when it was bottled? And they used to do that for picks. They don't anymore. But to be able to compare a 9-year from 2000 that aged until 2010 from one that aged 2010 to 2020.
And that's one of the cool things about craft distilleries is that they're like constantly tweaking things, and like that's what's really cool about Whiskey Acres is everything is sourced from their farm. They date all of their bottles, and like they're still fine-tuning their recipe a little bit and making some changes. So like a bottle from when they first opened will taste nothing like a bottle that they just released like yesterday, you know, which is very cool. Like even the weather that particular year when the corn was grown can influence how that whiskey turns out in the end, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, because of all these tweaks they're making too, like even batch to batch, you'll get a lot of differences. And another cool one is Town Branch Distilling. Their stuff has gotten so much better in the last 3 or 4 years, and that's because they switched to they were like a very high malt, like almost 40% malt in their bourbon, and it tasted like an Irish whiskey because the owner of the distillery at the time was, or the guy who started it was from Ireland, so he loved his malt whiskey and started the distillery, did a very high malt content. They kind of realized, ooh, we're in the heart of Kentucky and we're distilling with a high malt bourbon, which just isn't doing it for the people here. So they flipped to a more traditional heavy corn mash bill, and they did that about 7 years ago. So the stuff that they're putting out now is almost 100% the new mash bill. But over the course of the last 3 to 4 years, they've been slowly blending in the new with the old and upping the percentage of the new, lowering the percentage of the old. So that's been a really fun distillery to taste over the years. And man, their rep, shout out to Hank. He's been a good friend for a couple years. But he's been trying to get me to pick a barrel from them for probably the last 4 years. He's brought me a bunch of samples, and I kept telling him, this is getting better. This is getting better. This is getting better. Not ready yet, but this is getting a lot better than what it was. And we finally picked one that will be coming in within the next month. It's a 7-year barrel proof Kentucky bourbon with their new mash bill that's going to retail for under $50. And the only reason why it's so cheap is because they know that they need to get their bottles back out to the consumer and let people taste and realize what they have now with their new mash bill. But part of the reason why I bring that up is because we do have a Town Branch masterclass in August where Hank saved bottles from all these different barrel proof releases over the years. And we're just going to taste barrel proof small batch releases in like a 6 to 7 pour vertical, and just kind of taste their whiskey through time, through the last 3 to 5 years, and show how much one bottle that looks the same on the shelf can change over the years.
That'll be cool.
Yeah. That's like the kind of stuff that excites me. Like that's the kind of stuff I'd be searching for to buy, like something that you know is going to change, you know, something that's dated vintage wise, so that you can go back and say, wow, this Knob Creek from 2024 is a lot different than this Knob Creek from 2040, you know.
And there's just not a lot of distilleries doing true verticals like that, and like giving you the information that allows you to actually build that vertical, you know, at home. So yeah, that'll be really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you seamlessly transitioned into a plug, so you might as well keep going.
I might as well. If you want to sign up for any of these events, go to goldeaglewine.com or download our app and hit the events page. We just listed about 5 or 6 new ones this week, and they are all already halfway full. So definitely jump on those if you want to come. Follow us on Instagram at Gold Eagle Wine. Follow us on Facebook at Gold Eagle Spirits. And I think that's about it. Keep buying. Don't stop buying. Build up your collections. No, just kidding. But yeah, there's, you know, everyone's, I guess my closing thoughts, everyone is on their own path with this. And, you know, I think we're both in agreement that the best way to do this is to try before you buy, so you're not stuck with a bunch of bottles that you realize you don't really like, and they end up just taking up space until you finally give in and mix them into something or give them away or just throw them out. I know people that have thrown out bottles because they just have so much and they're like, I don't even want to deal with finding a home for this. Like, I just want to get it out of here and make more space. Don't do that. Find somebody who would really appreciate it. I'm sure there's people out there who would take any bottles you don't want. But yeah, lesson is to try before you buy. Find a good, cheap bar. Find a store somewhere that you can trust what they're putting out, what they're picking, and you can't really go wrong that route.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think you covered all my points. So listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Watch us on Spotify and YouTube. Leave comments or send us messages on Instagram at Bourbon Matters. Jesus, what was I just saying? Send us DMs on Instagram at Bourbon Matters, like Matt did. Thanks again, Matt, for this topic. We've got a couple more from him that I'm sure we'll tackle in the next couple weeks, like I said. We love getting feedback from everybody. I know everybody talks to me at the bar on Friday when I stop in, but leave comments and stuff so I can actually remember what you're talking about. Looking forward to hearing from people, hopefully. I'll see you guys next week. Happy Father's Day.
Happy
this should
Father's
be coming
Day.
out
Happy Father's
Sunday.
Day to
so,
you.
Yeah, first one.
First Father's Day. It's a big one.
Yeah, I'm making Wagyu New York strip steaks for me and the dads. So
nice.
It'll be a nice, relaxing Father's Day, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cheers, everyone.
Cool.
We'll see you next week.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks for listening.